right now. There you go.
Hey. Okay, thank you, Carrie. Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to our second virtual panel. This panel is titled Pathways to Healing, Navigating Grief, Abortion Care, and Creating Space for Joy and Sensuality. I am Trisha. I'll be the moderator for this panel discussion. I currently serve as one of the outreach leads for Asian Mental Health Project. I work primarily with the scheduling for stay and check-in and help make social media graphics from time to time. As a reminder, the Survivor Support Summit intends to cultivate a space for community learning and healing for survivors of sexual and intimate partner violence. We want to thank our summit partners, Yellow Chair Collective, Radiant Futures, and the art space Huntington Park, where our on-site component is being hosted. I'm extremely honored to be a part of this space as someone who, to be honest, who has witnessed intimate partner violence growing up. I have seen the deep pains and struggles that one undergoes while on their healing journey. So again, I'm very honored to be here and to also have the opportunity to speak with our lovely panelists who I'm now going to introduce. So our first panelist is a health and wellness advocate who works to empower students and families toward healthy lifestyle choices and to embrace their intersectionality. Everyone, welcome Angela.
Thank you, Trisha. It's so nice to be here with all of you today. Thank you, all of you panelists, for joining me. I'm so excited to hear and learn from all of you. I am zooming in today from Rhode Island, so really excited. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So our next panelist is a licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist from New York whose work supports youth and survivors of sexual assault and interpersonal violence. And not only is she passionate about mental health, but she's also passionate about fitness and the mind-body connection. Thank you so much, Tammy.
Thanks, Trisha. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. And like Angela said, learn amongst one another. I am zooming in from New York City, where it is very hot, so I'm just trying to stay cool. And I'm so excited to be a part of this. So thanks.
Thank you. And then our third panelist is an art therapist and somatic practitioner who founded her own business providing integrative trauma work and coaching and mentorship to women around the world. She's dedicated to helping visionaries heal, transform, and create lives that feel like art. Everyone, welcome Jade.
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. So honored to be a part of this panel. Echoing what Angela and Tammy said, really excited to just have this conversation and to learn from all different perspectives. And I am tuning in from Vancouver, and I actually just moved house and I have no Wi-Fi. So I hope my connection stays, and that's why I'm on my phone. So bear with me. So happy to be here.
We're so happy that you get to be here as well. And I love seeing how so far all our panelists are from so many different places because right now I'm from SoCal. So I love how we're all interconnected right now. So, and then last but not least, we have our last panelist who is a trauma recovery coach who also serves as the chief wellness officer of the Queer Asian Social Club and who has worked with institutions like Harvard, Fort Wayne Medical School, Medidata, and more. They work to empower everyone they meet to actualize their most authentic selves and radically rewire their brains to heal trauma at its roots. Give it up for J Mark.
Hello, my loves. Really glad to be here, tuning in from unceded Lenape land here in Philadelphia, PA. It's fascinating that this is the topic today as I'm navigating personal grief. And I'm happy to be here among such wonderful people and to learn from all of you and share in community together. So thank you.
Thank you everyone for your love. Thank you everyone for your lovely introductions. Again, I'm so excited to be in this space to learn from you all and to hear your expertise and knowledge. So we're just gonna jump right to the start of our conversation. And you know, I as part of Asian Mental Health Project, I do help out with the scheduling for stay and check-in. And one of the biggest topics that I do come across is one that J Mark had mentioned earlier, which is grief, a topic that we always need space for. And I think for this first question, I do want to ask, how does grief and loss manifest in survivors of power, gender-based violence that may be similar or different to other forms of grief?
I can go ahead and get started in just opening up the dialogue. I think just for starters, right, starting off in a foundation that grief and loss look so different for everyone. There's no one size fits all. And I think when we're talking about survivors of gender-based violence and other forms of violence as well, but specifically, sexual assault, dating violence, interpersonal violence, and things like that, survivors have their power stripped away from them in these situations, right? So I think when dealing with grief of any sort, it could look very isolating for survivors. It could look a little different than someone maybe navigating grief in a way that they're looking for community actively, whereas, a survivor might need that, but it might be more passive. So I think just really looking at isolation and how that plays a role in, losing power and control in these situations and how that manifests in grief as well.
If I could follow up on that, I think one of the biggest things to recognize too is the destruction of trust, of personal trust for the survivor, but also interpersonal trust in regards to relationships. To end up in a dynamic like that, in a situation like that, isn't just to say, I no longer trust this individual. That gender identity that person has, that presentation, if they have facial hair, if they have long hair, from that moment forward, for most survivors, then anybody who bears those physical representations then become trigger. And then furthermore, beyond that, it's the idea of burden of proof, right? So how does somebody navigating something so painful trust their own grief in a world that says, well, you have to prove that really happened, when in actuality, it's their own reality. And so being able, I'm putting the cart before the horse right now, but being able to just hold space for someone, and whatever they say, even if it's for you personally sounds like an inaccuracy, even if it seems like an extreme perspective, like quote unquote all men, being heard and validated in that expression is so necessary to navigate that grief and the loss of trust.
Thank you so much for Tani and J Mark for your insight. I definitely do resonate with what J Mark said when you have a loss of trust in yourself. And I feel like a lot of times we start to question, like, did this actually really happen to me? Or is it all in just my head? Or we start to question that, like, am I just overreacting after everything that's happened? And I think we let so much external get into us internally. So in following up with that, I do want to ask, in what ways can survivors and friends, family, organizations, spaces better tend to that grief and that loss?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. Tending to things like grief, loss, any type of trauma, you really have to set yourself up for success by being very mindful and patient. So there's no linear path to healing. It's sometimes you're going to feel like you're regressing. Sometimes you're going to feel like you're making progress, and these things are all very normal. But the human experience, really, it's when you think of mindfulness terms, it's summed up into 3 different categories. There's thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations. So being able to be mindful during those moments of what's happening in all of those categories, whether you're experiencing a trauma response or you're witnessing a trigger, being able to see what's happening in that moment so that way you can give your body the accommodations that you need in order to move forward. And then for those who are supporting those who are dealing with those trauma responses and survivors, also being patient with them, understanding that this is not an easy thing to do, to realize that, oh, my body's responding in this way, so that means I have to do this for myself. That takes a lot of practice to understand yourself and to understand that even if you're experiencing the same exact thing one day, you might not have the same exact response the next day. So being patient and very mindful within your own self in those moments, I think is really important on both ends, those supporting and those, no, excuse me, and those who are working towards a better quality of life.
Yeah, and also add in here, I love that, Angela, and I think that mindfulness piece is um, so crucial, and that body understanding, that somatic understanding of what trauma really, how that holds in us, and how that really can shape our relationships and our future relationships, and the way that we also relate to our past and hold our past. And I also wanted to bring in really the perspective of the importance of community, which I know this space is all about. And, you know, in terms of tending to grief and loss, really, you know, for me in my own journey, um, the most powerful and the greatest piece that I have really taken away from, yeah, just my own grief journey with my family has been really in leaning into places of support and really being open to sharing your experience, being open to feeling the heart of other people, and really also just even as I'm speaking, I'm feeling this bringing up something in me, you know, which is why I'm speaking slowly. But really, all to say that community is such a foundational piece that we all need. You know, support systems, being in family, chosen family, your own family, as a way of feeling held, feeling seen, and um, being with.
Yeah, I think that was all so beautiful. Thank you, Angel and Jade. And I love talking about all the somatic parts of this. I think it's so important. I think a huge part of this, kind of piggybacking off what I was saying before too, is knowing that survivors manifest grief and loss a lot of the times with isolation, and being, you know, a co-survivor, so a family, a friend, anything like that. I think it's just really empowering choice every step of the way, right? So just because you wouldn't experience something or you wouldn't handle something one way doesn't mean the person that you're trying to support would handle it in that way. So just really empowering choice, knowing that choice was taken away from this person. And then I think a huge part of it is understanding culture and background, right? So, you know, I'm Bangladeshi and Muslim, so grief and loss it's very quick, for lack of a better way to say it. You know, like people pass away and then you're expected to just grieve in this short amount of time and then sort of like move forward. And that doesn't resonate with me. I process very slowly. So I think just like noticing the dissonance of like, okay, where do I come from? What have I learned? What have I been conditioned to think is, you know, the baseline for grief and loss? How does my community talk about being a survivor, right? I think noticing all these things. So when building community, you know, like Jade said, like holding people close that kind of understand those similar values and beliefs. And that doesn't mean that they have to come from the same background, but, you know, just like adopting what resonates with you and knowing like, okay, what is this person's culture and background telling them about grief and loss, and how are they processing this? And, you know, whether that's supporting ourselves or supporting others, just holding, you know, that like I said, there's no one size fits all and it always looks so different, right?
Thank you all so much. I love that community was brought up because I am in occupational therapy school, and one of my first internships was at a domestic violence shelter. And so I did see that impact of community on the residents there and how they were able to have people they can confide to and be able to get and learn more about resources from. And so, yes, community is very important in battling the isolation that Tammy had brought up. So, my next question is kind of also focusing more on the community now, and that's whether, from your perspective, do you find that safe and brave spaces provide the kind of support that survivors need and deserve? And if not, what needs to what does it need to look like, or what needs to happen for that to become better spaces for survivors?
Um, so we're gonna jump right into being controversial for this one. Both from personal experience and also people that I've worked with personally and professionally. I think one of the biggest things is a radical shift in how we approach survivor circles, especially in relation to this topic. Our brains have these neural pathways that reinforce over time, right? Why do I have my personality traits? Because my experiences reinforce these neural pathways. And when you experience a trauma, and after a month you are diagnosed with PTSD from said trauma, what's happening is that anything can refire that loop telling you are traumatized, you are traumatized, you are traumatized. Early on, we're like, yes, listen, validate, all of that's incredibly important. But what I've found to be most challenging, both personally and interpersonally and professionally, is now you're going into a space, you're trying to live in a world where you're saying, I'm not in danger of this happening again. But then you end up in a room of people where everyone's sharing the story. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. It's incredibly traumatizing. It doesn't actually support, nourish, and nurture people expanding inward and outward to say there is a life beyond this. And I think that with Western medicine, we tend to focus on looking in all the trash and looking in all the garbage, but you don't need to know what's in the garbage can to take it out. There is a point where you can say, you know what? I do trust myself. I do believe in myself. I found the community that believes in myself. I need to now be around people and community and spaces that are like hope centered, that are moving towards that shift. And oftentimes you come into a space and it's just like, trauma for an hour. Let's come back next week and do the same thing. And then you spend the rest of the week trying to re-regulate after being re-traumatized. And so for me, that's where safe and brave spaces are not providing the support necessary because it's not normalized culturally. It's very much like, well, we need people to feel validated and heard. Honey, they're preaching to the choir. They don't need to feel validated and heard by people who've been through what they've been through. Those aren't the people that they need to be heard by. Those are the people that need to be like, you know what? I got up today and I hugged my partner and I felt safe. Now I'm hearing there's a possibility of something better. Somebody brushed past me and I didn't flinch away. Oh, no, that's a really good sign. I saw a sex scene on TV and I didn't feel activated. Oh, that's a wonderful thing. Those are things that people need. And for me, I think the language here too is if that's what survivors need, then they're going to stay survivors. They're going to stay in that headspace of I'm a survivor, as opposed to I'm a person. This fucked up thing happened to me, but I'm no longer being defined by that at a nervous system level, not just intellectually. So, do y'all want to cancel me? My email is nothing. I just have a lot of strong feelings, so I was really excited to come and talk about it.
Okay, Mark, I am gonna I don't really have much to say because I feel like you just mic dropped. You did great, honestly. So if anyone thinks you're controversial and they want to cancel me too, go ahead, because I think that was beautiful, like that positive reinforcement instead of just like, oh, I went through this over and over again. And like you said, just being re-traumatized. I think the idea of, I was thinking about like safe and brave spaces and community norms, community agreements that come up. And one community agreement that I always think of is that the one mic. And so it's like whoever is talking, you're the only one who's allowed to be talking right now. And I think about how that rule comes up because a lot of times, like you said, people in that room have gone through a very similar event. but it's never going to be the same exact event. So when you jump in and you're like, oh, I already know what you're going to say because I went through the same thing, like you're not validating that person at all. You are not giving them their voice. In fact, you are stripping them. Even though you're trying to give them a sense of community, you're trying to be like, I know what you went through. You don't, because you're not that person. So I feel like I love everything you just said. So thank you.
Oh, I love everything you said as well.
Thank you.
I want to second or third all of that. I think you all summed it up perfectly. It's not cancelable. It was perfectly said. And I think safe and brave spaces, right, have this notion of like being trauma informed. And I think that that is great and lovely, right? But like, what does that mean? What does that entail for the people that are actually in those spaces, right? Like, I mean, trauma informed, right, is just like shifting the question of like what's wrong with you to like what happened to you. But the more we answer that question, like J. Mark so beautifully said, right, we're activating that neural pathway in our brain, right? We're not allowing our brains to rewire, which they can, which is the beautiful part. Our brains are always shifting and changing, and they're so capable of change. So I think coming at it with like a strengths-based approach of how did you find healing today, can empower survivors, like, you so beautifully said, to be a human again and to just be and find that healing that Angela said so beautifully it's not linear. And just always empowering choice, right? Like it is one's choice how they have it, how they navigate this. And I think empowering that is the most important thing in these spaces.
There's there's so much that I could add and so much that you all have said that 100%. 100%. And I piggyback off of all of it and I fourth yeah, everything that's been said. One more thing that I feel like when it comes to, safe and brave spaces, kind of what off of, what Tammy you just said, safe is something that's subjective. And a lot of people and a lot of practitioners and a lot of, space holders will say, I'm creating a safe space and I am, you come in here and this is safe. And the truth is, when we go into any space and we're looking for healing and we're looking to feel held and we're looking for empowerment and to find that agency and choice, in many ways, we also create our own safety. It's our responsibility and it's our role and it's radical responsibility that we take to find ways to hold ourselves in our own safety. And so going back to, what I think I mentioned earlier, having relationships in your life that give you a sense of safety and real unconditional safety in yourself, practicing ways to work with your nervous system and work with your body, coming back to your body, coming back to, whatever that looks like. I also work spiritually, and so I take a little bit of a spiritual perspective into it. But really, at the end of the day, like we have so much more agency and power than often spaces will like us to not believe, but will kind of draw a line around or draw a box around. And you are also going back to what Angela was saying, like that mindfulness of coming back to the body, coming back to what's true for you. And when we come into these spaces with this anchoring and with that resource inside of you, that's, that's how we can also bring safety into ourselves in spaces and in community.
I realize this gets into your next question, Trisha, a little bit, and Jade tackled it. It was like, we're just going to answer all the things in advance. But I wanted to build off that too, because what Jade said was amazing. And to build off that, and once again, unfortunately, growth, change, healing doesn't happen in safety. And that's a really hard truth to accept. Because until your perceptions of the world are challenged, you'll never change your perceptions, right? And so when I think about safe and brave spaces, one of the issues is, by definition, like you can Google it, safe spaces are like without any conflict. But if you're talking about something that is innately difficult and inherently challenging, there's going to be conflict. And to Jade's point, safety is subjective. And so I think one of the most important things, I whenever I facilitate, I always say this is a brave space, not a safe space. And everybody is radically responsible for their own sense of safety as we progress. It doesn't mean they can't reach out. I know I say a lot. I got ADHD, and outside of that, my life is saying controversial shit. So I'm always like, hey, if I said something wrong, I can't do better if I don't know better. So please let me know. Maybe I need to rephrase. Maybe I need to change my approach. But I would never shame you for thinking I said something wrong, right? And I think the danger of saying a space is a safe space by the current paradigm definition of it is, what if you are the survivor in the room who has a different perspective and you don't feel secure? And once again, this is going to be incredibly edgy, and I know this is a hot button word, but to my point, I have worked with survivors who are like, I just want to be able to forgive. But if you're in a space that says we're not talking about forgiveness because forgiveness has been so weaponized, now this is somebody who's being left out. Now this is somebody who can't process and heal in the way that they need to heal. And so a brave space, a space in which people can co-create their own understanding of what healing looks like without judgment, without oppression, without this kind of fear-based restriction. Because if you're gonna be a healer in the space, you're gonna trigger somebody. It comes with the job. And if you're so afraid of triggering people because you don't know how to regulate yourself amidst their trigger, then honey, you need to do some more work before you come back to holding those spaces. Because one of the worst things you can do is, in reactivity, cause further harm to somebody who came to you saying, I need help, because that could scare them away from seeking help from someone who could be more qualified in that moment.
Okay, y'all, can I just say I'm like getting a headache because I'm like nodding so much because like we're dropping so much knowledge, but seriously, I'm like, I can't stop. My neck is like hurting. But Jade, like, and J Mark both, like, I was thinking of a personal anecdote of I was taking a training, and I'll make this short, Trisha, so we can continue moving on. But I was taking a trauma-informed yoga class, and I remember asking the instructor, like, kind of like about, promising a safe space, essentially. And she was like, she really humbled me, and she was like, no, that we can never promise these spaces, as everyone said, right? Because we are working with individuals who've experienced trauma, and we can never promise that somebody won't have a nervous system activation response or what have you. So she reworded it as like embodying a sense of safety within yourself and being able to nurture a space that can embody a sense of safety for you. But obviously I start all my workshops and things like that with just like content warnings of like, okay, this is a space that, like J Mark said, is brave, right? It's encouraged to embody a sense of safety for you, and knowing that the topics we're going to discuss are heavy or are so potentially triggering. Just navigating, okay, what does that look like? Do you need to put your head down? Do you need to walk out of the room? Do you need to come find me? So I think just, I say all that to say that it was such a learning moment for me in my career of like, oh yeah, like I can't promise that somebody won't feel triggered in this space as much as we want to ensure that people feel that sense of safety in them. So I think the main thing is the change of verbiage here, right? Not promising survivors or anyone who have experienced trauma that they will or won't feel a certain thing. And then, like J Mark said, so importantly, like if you're not the person that can hold space for that, finding someone that can, or further feeling comfortable doing that, because really the growth happens in the discomfort, right? Just like we all said. So that's my spiel on that.
Can I add one more thing? This is getting really long, but this just came forward, and obviously I work as an art therapist, and I know something that came up. I think J Mark, I think we all kind of touched on it, but the re-traumatization that sometimes can come from just talking and verbalizing and verbalizing and verbalizing, especially in the context of a group. And of course, there's beautiful holding in that too, but sometimes that talking and talking, like J Mark said, it's going to alert and refire the same neural circuits in your brain that's causing your nervous system to go into the same pattern. And actually, one of the reasons why I decided to train in art therapy and become an art therapist was around the nonverbal element of it. And how can we actually find our own sense of safety, our own sense of anchoring, our come back to a more somatic, a more visceral, sometimes that can mean actually safer way of expressing our story. Because ultimately our story, we want to share our story, we want to be heard in it, we want to feel seen in it. And sometimes finding spaces where it's not just all about talking. We can play with art, we can use dance, we can use movement, we can use mindfulness. There are so many also alternative modalities where where we can come together and heal.
I love how y'all came in hot on this question. When I was like, when I was asking the question initially, I could see from like the corner of my eye that J Mark was so ready to like unmute himself and just like drop the mic. I was like, oh, he's gonna drop the mic right. They're gonna drop the mic right now. I was like, I love it. I love all the insight y'all brought for this question. And I think a lot of y'all mentioned about um y'all a lot of your answers were referring to like internally what we can do to reclaim that sense of trust, or how we can like be the brave spaces that we want other people to show to us. And I'm gonna actually jump ahead and ask, like, when a survivor is entering a new relationship, how can they feel safer or feel braver when entering it, and how can their partner help facilitate that as well? Mhm.
I can jump in on that a bit. I think for starters, like harboring community and embodied safe relationships that could be platonic or familial, right? And regaining and rewiring your brain to say, okay, an interpersonal relationship doesn't have to feel dangerous. It doesn't have to make me feel unsafe. It doesn't have to make me sacrifice my trust. Is a great place to start and kind of rebuild that foundation of finding a sense of safety in others and in yourself as well. Um, I think that can also rewire your brain to like allow you to like rewrite your trauma narrative and to rewire, okay, this happened to me. It doesn't have to happen to me in every relationship that I build. So I'd say, building a community of friends, of family, whatever makes you feel safe prior to, feeling a sense of safety in a romantic relationship. If that's where if a romantic relationship, right, is where you lost the trust, is where you lost that sense of agency. I think rebuilding it in other ways too. And then, like I think we all kind of touched upon, I mean, I am a talk therapist, so obviously I love that as a modality, but like Jade said, um, there are some flaws, right? Continuously repeating your trauma, your experience. It's great for a bit, but I think it could reinforce that idea of like, all right, is this who I am? Is this, you can over-identify with what happened to you. And so mindfulness practice, right? Like movement therapy, like yoga's can really, really allow survivors to reclaim their bodies. Art therapy, everything that we've kind of talked about, music, playing an instrument, and doing these things that are outside of talk to reclaim your agency so that you don't, when you're finding yourself dating or you find a sense of agency within yourself. And you get an understanding of this isn't my story, isn't who I am, right? It's not, it's just what happened to me. And so using all those healing modalities, I think, can really help build a relationship. So yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Angela. I saw you, honey. Live your truth. I'll wait. It's all
Go
good.
for it, J-Mark, you're good.
I was gonna say I'm a big fan of what I like to call RTG. Remove the guesswork. So I'm in partnership with an autistic person, and it has been a journey learning that when they say something, that's literally what they mean, and then you begin to realize just how many neurotypical interactions are just people talking around things and asking something but not really asking the thing. And then I'm in this phase of my life where I'm like, maybe the neurotypicals are actually the mentally ill, because like that should be how we communicate to people, is just very direct, right? So if you're getting into a new romantic, intimate, or sexual relationship, take a page out of our autistic siblings. Be direct. Be like, and be direct in a way that feels safe for you, right? Like if you are with someone long enough that you feel like you're ready to engage in a form of intimacy, then that would be the time to be like, hey, like you don't have to do it on a first date, but like, second, third, however many dates you want to do, being able to be like, hey, I don't want to get into the detail of this, but this is what I'm comfortable with. This is what I'm not comfortable with. These are my boundaries. If they are going to change, I will tell you when they change. And being somebody who can be incredibly receptive of that is so crucial and important. So yeah, remove RTG and it's great for just like non-romantic, non-sexy time relationships too. Just like be direct. Hey, I want to be your friend. Hey, I want to hold hands. Hey, don't want to hold hands right now. That's okay. Like being able to do that is also incredibly empowering for survivors, because in a world, once again, culturally speaking, that denies your experience and your existence, you being able to reclaim agency by being very firm with your boundaries and expressive with your boundaries, then will make it easier for you to interact moving forward with other people in other aspects of your life.
Yeah, so Tammy and J-Mark, you both said something that I want to touch on and just kind of follow up with. So I'm going to start with you, Tammy. You had mentioned something about the idea that as a survivor, it's pretty common to feel like you are your trauma, like that is now part of your identity. And I'm going to speak in I statements here. So, but I think it's not far-fetched to say that I'm not the only one who's felt this way. But just like when I have felt like a trauma response and I told myself, I just want to get back to normal. But like, what is normal? Because what I'm experiencing right now in the trauma response is actually pretty normal. Like, that's okay to be experiencing what I'm experiencing. So this myth or this fantasy of like getting back to normal, that's setting yourself up for failure, because you're trying to attain something that doesn't really exist. You're painting this fantasy, this picture of what you are saying is normal. When honestly, for myself, I've found, and this comes up a lot in like psychology as well as like mindfulness-based practices, the idea of it's called the learning zone model. There's a lot of different phrases and different variations of it, but I refer to it as the zones of experience because that's how it was introduced to me. So instead of trying to get back to the sense of normalcy, rather just seeing where you are and what you're experiencing in that moment, I would say cautiously, but also with a sense of curiosity. I think, J-Mark, you had mentioned in the last question, like you're never going to change your perspectives on things unless you're challenged. So that's when you have the zone of challenge or the learning zone. This is where you're experiencing things that can be somewhat anxiety provoking, but this is really where you're going to grow. That whole term of you don't grow inside your comfort zone, right? So that's one zone. Obviously, there is the comfort zone, which is your anchor point, like your home base. And then there's also the zone of panic, the panic zone, where you are just, this is the way the red flags are coming up. This is not it for me. I'm not feeling this. I need to get out of here. And then there's the dissociated zone, where you put up this wall of protection and you are just checked out. So knowing how to navigate between those different zones, knowing when you're in those different zones, so that way you can realize, okay, it's time to get back to my comfort zone. Okay, it's time to dial it back a little bit so I can stay in this challenge zone, so I can be able to move forward, but not put too much risk. So I would say being able to work through that helped me a lot within my own personal self to not walk around with this identity of I am my trauma. No, I'm a person who went through a trauma, and I know how to accommodate myself to get out of that panic zone, to get out of that dissociated zone, so that way I can grow more. And then J-Mark, you had said, goodness, you said something really good. Oh, being direct. The idea of being direct, I wanted to touch on that too, because that I've always said, I say it to my husband all the time. I say it to people like my friends who like ask me questions about like, oh, can you give me a little bit of advice for like my relationship, whatever. But I always start with like, do you want me to listen or do you want my advice? So when they do want my advice, I tell them that I believe that a huge relationship killer, and this is even like a relationship with yourself, but a huge relationship killer is unspoken, unmet expectations. Because you paint this picture of the other person or even like of yourself, and you hold them to such a high standard, and you don't say anything about that standard that you've created on your own. And then all of a sudden you're getting disappointed, and you're getting disappointed over and over and over again. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, this relationship isn't what I thought it was going to be. But the other person doesn't even know that there's these expectations and these goals that you have set for them. So the idea of being direct and being honest and open about what you need is so important, because you are the expert on you. There's no one on this planet who knows your thoughts, who knows your emotions, who knows your bodily sensations the way that you do. So you're the best teacher to teach someone about yourself. So I would say that that can sound vulnerable. That can be like, oh, like I have to share who I am and my wants and my needs. But at the same time, it can be very empowering, because you get to be the one in charge of the agency. You get to be the one to say, this is how I want to be treated. This is what I need in order to be successful. So I challenge anyone who sees it as like, oh, I don't want to get there, because it is very, very vulnerable. You're right, it is vulnerable, but it can be empowering as well.
And vulnerability is how we continue to increase intimacy in our relationships, and how we actually feel safe to feel love, and to feel safe to love again, or to relate again, however, whether it be in a romantic relationship, sexual relationship, your friendships. And Angela, literally what you were saying, I was like, that's exactly what I was about to voice, which is just educate, like you have the wisdom and you have the power and you have the capacity from what, you have gone through, what happened to you. Sometimes we can, sometimes, I don't know, this is also going to be a controversial thing that I'm going to bring in. Of course, when we talk about trauma and trauma informed, it's about the thing that happened to you. It's about the, how your body, how you responded, how your nervous system responded to that event that happened to you. At the same time, something that I do like to bring in with, clients that I work with, survivors of, sexual trauma or not, I also like to take the perspective of life. Things in life do happen for you, and it's really up to us. I know this is controversial, but it really is up to us in many ways to come back to that courage within, come back to that possibility and agency within, to ask the question of, how do I actually get to teach from this? How do I get to rise from this? How do I get to help others as well, and teach others how they, like, what I need in a relationship, what boundaries now mean to me, how we embody that and how we hold that, how we assert that, how we speak to that, also helps others learn about themselves and to relate to their relationships in a more empowered way, in a more compassionate way. And so, this beautiful resiliency work and this healing work, growth work of um, setting new boundaries, as J. Mark said, and educating and teaching and being the wise one now, it gets to be a beautiful thing. And so we can also lean into that, this gets to happen for me. This gets to make me into a stronger, more resilient person, being, lover, friend, family member.
And if I could just add to all the beautiful points that everyone made on this question, I think as a survivor, it's probably very challenging to set boundaries, and your boundaries have been obviously disrespected, taken away from you, right? So you might be thinking, how do I communicate and be direct? Where do I even start? Because I think communication and being direct is at the core of all of this, like J. Mark said, and like we all said, right? So you might be thinking, well, I tried to do that and that was disrespected, or my partner didn't hear me, and experienced and you've experienced the trauma. Now you don't really know how to verbalize that. So I think fostering these other relationships where you almost do exposure therapy, right? You set the boundaries with the friends and the family. You say no to a plan, however that looks like to you. You start small, and you read the other person of like, all right, do I feel respected in this? Am I feeling an embodied sense of safety, right? Start small, right? It could even just be like, no, I don't really want to go to dinner tonight. And that is a scary thing for a lot of people, but that is an act of self-care. And I think that's such a great place to start, right? And if you're thinking like, okay, well, I'm scared to set this boundary with my romantic partner in the future, or what if I communicate and they don't hear me, and thus, I feel unsafe. I think starting small, right? And starting from the beginning when you are entering a relationship that you want to be more romantic. Just like J. Mark said, being communicative, being direct. If you're already sensing in the beginning, like maybe they're upset that you said no to dinner, maybe that's, evidence that you collect of like, all right, that is not serving me. And you kind of, I always call it evidence collection. But yeah, just start small too, because it might be hard for a survivor to even set those internal and external boundaries, right? Oops, sorry.
Thank you, everyone. I feel like y'all just continue to keep dropping really great stuff. I I especially loved it when Anja was like, "You are the expert on you." That I have that written down. I thought that was a very powerful statement. And yes, on being the direct, I think in today's world in general, we need to do more of that, honestly. And so we are coming to time. Um, Before we went live, we were talking a bit about like whether this was a 1 hour or 2 hour session. And I'm suddenly wishing it was 2 hours now because I just love hearing y'all speak and I wish we can just keep going on and on. But unfortunately I can only ask one more question. And this question is shedding light on abortion care, especially with everything that's going on politically. So I do want to touch on that. But how does access to abortion care foster survivors reconnecting with their powers, and in what ways do these bans affect this?
Legalize it? Is that that's just the first thing comes to my mind. Just federally legalize it, protect it, but also, to take the perspective of if there is a pregnancy from the event, right? That child didn't ask to be born into the world like that, and that parent didn't ask to raise that child in that environment. And the in utero trauma alone, the human being that will be a product of that is starting out life with one hell of a handicap, and that really sucks. And so for someone to go through such a horrific experience as, partner violence, sexual violence, to then carry the burden of one half of the life of the perpetrator is not okay. It's a perpetual reminder. And once again, it's no fault of the child for existing, but a parent's nervous system, not like you could be like the most devout healing practitioner, mindful practitioner ever, but your nervous system is going to feel some type of way if you take that baby to term and bring that baby into the world. And trying to create a new world for yourself with a child that is effectively a constant reminder of that trauma, it's hard to take that power back. And again, abortion is an incredibly personal decision or choice. I would never disparage someone who decides to go for it. I would also never disparage someone who decides that's not for them. But by making it accessible, by making it, once again, the phrase is pro-choice for a reason, you're empowering individuals to make a decision that is related directly to their bodily autonomy. So legalize it. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, I was going to say exactly the end of what you said, J. Mark. I think it's crazy that this is even a political issue or in the hands of politicians. I think equal and fair access to abortion is affirming to reproductive justice. It is affirming to bodily autonomy. And when we take that away from people that are able to get pregnant and survivors too, when we're taking that away from anyone, we are telling people that they are not worthy of making a choice with their own body. And that is further stripping power and control away from individuals and putting it in the hands of dangerous people. So I think allowing fair and equal and safe access to abortion is pivotal to just empowering humans over choice of their own body.
So much on all your insight, and like, yes, let's just, if we could have it in our law, I wish we could just legalize it right now. But thank you guys so much for this space that thank you so much for being a part of this webinar, for this discussion. I really wish that we had 2 hours with y'all. I don't think I could ever get tired listening y'all drop your controversial takes, which I don't think is controversial at all. I think someone has to say it, and someone has to bring light to these thoughts and these things that could help better enhance the research that they are for survivors. We have to speak the truth of it all. So I want to thank you all for your time. I don't see any questions in the Q&A section, so I do now want to take this time to remind everyone that this was, I believe, the last session for our virtual component. And so now at 5 p.m., we will have our on-site component, which will be at the Art Space Huntington Park. And I believe the first session for our on-site will be a sound bath offering. So that's really exciting. And again, I want to thank to all our lovely panelists for their insights, for all their controversial takes, and for just being here. Thank you.